Welcome to episode 25 of In Touch with iOS, a podcast for sharing tips, apps, and gear for iPhone and iPad, along with related technologies that get us using iOS in fun, productive, and meaningful ways. I'm your host, Melissa Davis, and joining me as always is David Ginsburg. How are you, Dave?
I'm doing good. I had to reach away and mute my Amazon because it may go off here. So I forgot to do that as we were playing before the show started.
We have our little play date here.
You did say that at the beginning, didn't you?
Yeah.
It turned out to be that way, didn't it?
It's always fun. It's always fun talking to you about iOS and stuff.
Yeah, a lot of pre-show stuff. But now we're now recording. We're going to talk about some fun stuff today.
Yeah.
A lot to talk about. Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We got a couple news stories we'll hit. And then I think the majority of the show today is going to be on browsing. You came up with a pretty good topic. I think we'll both give the listeners some great information about Safari because we all live on Safari with iOS, and there's so much to know and so much to do. And then we'll hit some of the third-party browsers, which I really like. And we got about 6 of them that I'm going to talk about and give some insight.
And why you might want to use them over Safari. But
yeah.
For the most part, we want to basically get you thinking about browsing. So I will make a recommendation right now at the top of the podcast that as you're listening to this, you may want to have you're going to have your iOS device, hopefully, that you're listening to this on, and you can work in Safari while you're listening, and you can kind of play along as we go. And we're going to have links in the show notes that you can click on as an example.
Yep.
That's one of the things that I pride myself on with this podcast is I really love doing show notes. And I like adding lots of links and things for people to interact with. And so I really encourage people, make it worth my while. Go check out our show notes. It's at intouchwithios.com if you've gotten to us from some other way. But I put lots of links in the show notes. So as you're listening to this podcast, be clicking on those links and being engaged with Safari, and we're going to give you tips to hopefully make it so that you can get more out of Safari and iOS in your iPhone and your iPad, your iOS devices, and navigating. So we're going to go on a little Safari today.
There you go.
So why don't you want to start in with the news, Dave? Yeah,
we just had a couple news stories. There wasn't heavy news out there, but a couple interesting ones caught my eye and wanted to talk about. We did mention a couple episodes ago about Apple purchasing Texture. Actually, it was last.
Yeah, that was when we were talking about magazine
subscriptions. Actually, they bought them last month. This is April, so in March, they announced that they purchased that company Texture, which provides an unlimited subscription to multiple different magazines. And it's like a $10 a month subscription. About 200 magazines or so are in their catalog, including big ones like People Magazine and Time and Wired and so on and so forth. Well, Apple announced their Bloomberg, who our quote is in the show notes, has said that Apple is going to consider integrating a news subscription service, and I'm not at all surprised that they're going to do this. So it's going to drive all the traffic over to the Apple News app with subscription offerings similar to what Texture is doing now. Of course, Apple has declined to comment what their plans are. I sure hope they keep Texture the way it is. I'm not a subscriber, but but a lot of people like to read the magazines, and you get tired of having to subscribe to 10 or 15 different magazines if you don't want to. Of course, the content's available online, and of course, you can go to your libraries. We've talked about all that stuff before. But I think Apple's successes in other markets, I think this is where they're looking to drive their services growth on, especially using iPhones and iPads. So I thought that was interesting that they're going to go through and have that out there for people to review. So again, it's like
they want to disrupt the market somehow by purchasing. They'll gobble up something and they'll purchase it, and we can make it better. We can either kill it or we can make it better.
Just like Amazon. Amazon does the same thing, and they've killed a lot of things in the retail market. Apple's going to disrupt some of the technology. But no, people like to read
let them try.
The people like to read magazines, and as well as I do, and I think it's a great feature. So, the other article that caught my eye was the Apple Insider. We quoted Apple's iPhone. If not everybody isn't aware of that, of course, has the Do Not Disturb feature, and most of us use that to put it on Do Not Disturb. Usually, I have it set to 10 o'clock in my time from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And they did add a feature called while driving, do not disturb while driving, which is a feature that you turn on and automatically the iPhone knows that you're driving because it senses the motion, or like in my case and many who have cars who have Bluetooth, it senses that you're hooked up to your car. So it automatically says you will not be disturbed while you're driving. And I've seen how it works. It's really cool because if someone texts you, they're going to get an automatic message from back. I'm driving right now, and I will get back to you once I'm finished. As I'm not receiving any notifications right now. If it's an urgent reply, you could reply urgent, then it would go through, and people see that. So,
you know what got us trained for this? Keyword emphasis, train, was Pokemon Go. Because when it first came out, Barry will laugh at this. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Barry.
When we first started out with Pokemon Go, people were getting in trouble for driving while playing
while Pokemon going.
Yeah, and so now it detects. Yeah, it's so now we know that it's paying attention to the motion, and you always get that thing popped up. My kids are really quick to swipe that away. Like, no, I'm a passenger. Let me play my game.
But really, the article was discussing how the feature is helping reduce dangerous habits. And I use it. When I drive, I generally don't turn it off. But the thing is, you can, because the thing is, it does sense it no matter what. If you're a passenger in the car and you have it turned on, you can tap your phone and then it says, "I'm not driving." Well, of course, you can be driving and do that too. I'll admit sometimes I do that. Mm-hmm. But if it's important enough, it is what it is. It's definitely a great feature to really help discipline you to don't. I mean, you should not be texting and driving. I don't text and drive for sure.
Especially for young drivers, like inexperienced drivers or people that just their prefrontal cortex is not quite baked yet. They should probably just have this on by default, and it could be a condition of parents giving their teenagers a cell phone who are going to be driving. In fact, I'll talk about this more in another episode when we dive into this topic more. But we are, we keep saying this. I just keep dragging my heels on it. I'll be honest. We're on the verge of giving our oldest a cell phone soon, and so we've been researching contracts and looking at different things to help guide him. And we did come up with one. And we decided that we would talk about, texting while driving, and that was going to definitely be something that we were going to put in the contract early on. That he has to promise that he won't text while he's driving. I mean, I don't even want to think about him driving, let alone just even using a cell phone out in the wild, But it's a reality that we have to face as parents. But more importantly, as he gets older, even before he starts driving on his own, he's going to be a passenger with other younger kids that are driving, eventually sooner than later. And so we talked about how he needs to promise to be aware of that kind of behavior and not even ride with I'll call them kids, young people driving who decide to text and drive, and we talked about how, in the contract that he would promise that if he was with a friend who was driving, and this is going to happen probably in the next couple of years as he starts going on different things with kids who are driving, that if the person driving was going to attempt to text and drive, that he would offer, hey, why don't you let me send that text for you? I'm a passenger, I'm in the back seat, or, I'm not the one driving. If it's really that important, I mean, we always say it can wait, that's just a motto that we want to teach people now, that it can wait. But if it can't, for whatever reason, I can't really imagine, but, in a young person's life, but if it's an emergency or something, he'll offer to send the text. So that could be like maybe an etiquette or courtesy kind of thing that kids start to learn how to do for each other as they're becoming passengers in vehicles where kids are texting and driving. It's just something to think about. I will say that as much as I don't condone texting and driving, I don't use this feature only because I don't have like a set time to drive, and because I prefer do not disturb, which is like, kind of shuts down everything. I just kind of keep do not disturb on because, when I'm driving and I want to go work with a client or I'm talking to the kids, I don't want really anything coming through. So I kind of already use do not disturb. I just don't use the do not disturb while driving kind of feature because I drive too many. I don't have like set times. I'm kind of all over the place because I'm a consultant and because I'm constantly, picking up the kids or dropping off the kids somewhere. So I drive all different kinds of times. So I don't have like a set time that I could turn it on and off. So that's why it doesn't work for me. And that's what's great about Apple and about iOS is that there are so many customizations that you can make that suit your needs. So do not disturb while driving may not suit my personal need, but do not disturb as a whole, I utilize that all the time.
Absolutely. So I thought it was an interesting article. I thought interesting for our listeners to be educated about, especially helping your kids. They should not be texting and driving for sure. It's just
model a good example.
Very, very dangerous. And, those advertisements all the time, the 5 seconds
so if you're listening to this podcast while you're driving, do not be clicking links while you're driving.
Please don't.
Wait till you're on the bus or public transit or
That's right.
Don't do it while you're walking. There's plenty of other opportunities, but it's just food for thought, that we're going to be talking about different tips and techniques that you can try. But by all means, when you are not driving, we'll dive into the next section here.
We wanted to follow up from the last episode, iMessages and iCloud. I think you and I had a discussion, and we were just trying to debate or understand: when you delete a message on one device, does it delete across all your iOS devices? And the answer still is no. We were talking about this pre-show, and as much as I did some research and checking it out, it was in one of the early betas of 11.3. But then they decided to remove it. And it still is not in the current version of 11.3, and I haven't seen any other information relates to it. What we're really talking about is if let's say you delete your an iMessage or a message on your iPhone, and then you go to your iPad, it's still there. The same thing if it was on your Mac. If you want the messages on your Mac, if you deleted something on your Mac, it would still be on your iPhone and your iPad. So. Is that a good thing? Maybe. I kind of think about it as, okay, I remember that message, and then I can go in and delete it. Is it a pain? Yeah, because then you got, especially on the Mac, I don't like it because then I have to go in and delete every single one of those messages on my Mac, and then I generally don't like to use the Messages app on my Mac as much as my iOS devices. But the short answer with that was no. It's unfortunately still isn't available because there was a website out there that showed some screenshots that had a tick that turned it on. It backs them up in iCloud. Well, your messages are still backed up in iCloud because it restores it in your backup.
Yeah, so you want to be looking for this. It's basically coming soon to an iOS device near you.
Right.
We just don't know when exactly. It was, I guess, it was promised in 11.3, which is what we just upgraded to. But for whatever reason, they must have removed it towards the end before they released the gold standard, I guess, as it's called. They were doing a lot of that too, which was kind of frustrating. They'd show these new features like AirPlay 2. They had it in for a little bit and then they took it out. So they're like, just kidding.
Well, I have this feeling of Apple's just being very cautious because of bugs. I mean, iOS 11 in
Apple
general.
Maps, maybe. Sorry, I had to go there.
Yeah. iOS 11 in general. I think
they learned their lesson. Don't roll out things that are half baked. Well, I don't know if we can say they learned their lesson completely. It is what it is. Stuff gets rolled out when it's half baked, but this is one of those things probably that people really are going to be counting on.
Yeah,
so and
it could cause problems too. I mean, it really could because maybe someone would not want to be doing that, and it gets all of a sudden turned on. So,
right, and I can see lots of places where that is going to wreak havoc. So, just to reiterate, what you want to be looking for in a future operating system update, which isn't there right now, but this is where it should end up showing up. So you're going to want to, on either your iPad or your iPhone, one of your iOS devices, you're going to go into settings, and then you're going to tap on your name, and then that's where your iCloud section is.
Right.
And then you're going to tap on iCloud, and you're going to look for that list that loads that says apps using iCloud. And like we said, we saw some screenshots from some other websites where they were showing the developer screenshots of what it looked like currently at the time. And in that list there was iMessage. And that is not, or I guess it was messages, I should say. I should clarify. It was messages, not iMessage, because iMessage is the service. Gosh, I just went through this with a client the other day. It's so confusing for my people that I work with because they're like, what's the difference between messages and messenger And I message, like, there's all these vocabulary terms, and oh my gosh, it's like, okay, let's take a picture. And then that's frustrating too, because, and this is something that I'm so frustrated with because of trying to explain it to people. In iOS, the icon for messages is a green background with a chat bubble on it. But on the Mac, the messages icon is blue. It's a blue bubble that has a little white chat bubble with the 3 dots because that indicates, it's like what it looks like when someone's texting you. Why aren't they the same? Why aren't they the same? That drives me crazy because I wish I could just point to it. Here, see, look, it's the same thing, just from one screen to the next. Like, why should it be different? Because, I mean, they updated, for example, the Photos app icon. It's a circle in the dock on the Mac, and it's a square with rounded corners in iOS, but I call it the little peacock colored, petals. It's the same logo. It's the same icon. It's the same design. Right. Why do they not? I'm curious to know what the human interface guidelines are. Maybe I can look it up somewhere. What is the reasoning behind the different color scheme? Because and then it gets really confusing because then some of my clients are learning about Messenger for Facebook. Right. And so then that's really confusing. I literally had to type out some instructions the other day where I highlighted the ES on messages and the ER on Messenger so that they would know the difference between what they were asking me about. So anyway, that's a little preview into, we'll talk about that some other time in more depth when we know more, once we get that feature. I was just curious because, we were told it was going to come in 11.3 and it's not really there, which I'm kind of glad about because, like, as we said, it could really wreak havoc because, for example, I know that one of the reasons why they're going to do it is because of the frustration of setting up a new device. And this happened to a family member of mine. They forgot that they had all of these messages and I told him, I was like, I could use iAmazing. I could copy it over for you if you like, and then just, give them to you. Yeah, we'll get to it sometime. And it didn't happen. And then they wiped their phone, gave it to another family member when they upgraded and forgot that they had all those messages history that didn't come over on the new device. So I know that that's one of the biggest pushes for why people want messages in iCloud so that it does sync to new devices so that you don't lose those histories because they're really valuable and really important to a lot of people. However, there is going to come a time, I know for my needs especially, where, for example, I have a 32 gigabyte iPad because I like to live lean, and messages on the iPad, yes, I like to receive them, but I don't necessarily want to keep them there. That's not where I do most of my communication and messages. I like to keep it on my Mac and I like to keep it on my iPhone, but I want to be able to delete them on my iPad. I don't want them to delete everywhere else. And that's what's going to happen in the future. However, like I said before, I'll reiterate, when you go in the future, when this becomes a feature and you go into settings and you tap on your name, I think what's going to happen, and this will be interesting. I'm looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a toggle switch, and I'm hoping that that's how it will work, and then I'll be able to toggle it off on my iPad and leave it toggled on, enabled on everything else. Yep. So we'll have to follow up with that in the future, but that's what I'm hopeful for.
That's where we are so far.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So let's segue right into settings of Safari. Since we're already there, we're in the settings screen. That's what I'm looking at. I thought that would be a good place to start off talking about our main topic, which is Safari. And anytime that I explore an app with people, what I really like to start out with is settings, because that's the first place where you want to configure or set up your settings, how you want it to act. And so I think it's important to just go right into settings and then go to Safari and then start taking a look at what the choices are in there. So I'm not going to go through every single one of them, but I just wanted to highlight a few that I think are important. By default, I believe the search engine is Google. Now, I prefer it. I think you prefer it. Are you a Binger or are you a Yahooer?
Nope, I have Google.
Yeah, so I like to stick to Google. However, if you want to change that, that's where you can change it. I usually leave most of the toggle switches on for this, like search engine suggestions and Safari suggestions and quick website search and preload top hit, stuff like that. In the next section for general is where they talk about autofill. And I want to touch on this because I want to delve into password management just a little bit. That's like a whole other 5 shows. But in here is where you can control whether or not passwords and things get stored. Now, I don't know about you, Dave, but I really don't recommend storing passwords in a browser. I really personally, I recommend, and I know a lot of people that work in InfoSec that recommend using a password manager.
Sure.
To store your passwords. I mean, in a pinch, there's been a few times, and it really, really depends on the situation. I might have like maybe 3 where there's websites for like something to do with the kids' school that are just obnoxious about logging in with a password or whatever. And so I've saved those there because I didn't consider them quite as important as like, I would never save my banking passwords in there. It's just not something, I don't know, I feel dirty thinking about it. It's just not something I recommend. So that's the section where you want to pay attention to what that is set to, because names and passwords, there is a switch there. And if you turn that on, it'll offer to save your passwords. And not only can it be possibly exploited by something, I mean, I don't know. It's Apple's pretty safe and locked down when it comes to the stuff. However, the problem when I'm talking about exploitation here, I'm talking about your memory and complacency. What happens in my experience in working with so many people that do this is they just set it and forget it. And this is one of those places where you really don't want to forget how things are set. You really want to have a little bit more control over that. And so by turning this on, you become complacent and you start to forget what things you've set where with which passwords. Now, Password Manager is designed so that you don't have to remember your passwords, but you're still kind of forced to interact with the logins in a way that you see where your passwords are stored and what information is in there. Whereas this is like you kind of set it and forget it, and then it gets stored in there. And then what happens over time is sometimes, and I've seen this work in the Mac version of Safari, where I've seen people save their passwords in Safari, then forget their password, go through, and this is with like their Apple ID and stuff that's really important, or they'll go to other websites and they'll log in, they'll change their password. Meanwhile, the old password is still stored in there. And then they go round and round and round and circle the drain trying to get logged into websites and get so frustrated because both the incorrect password and the correct password are saved. And so it gets really confusing over time. So I just don't recommend it. So that's enough about that section.
Well, can I just make a comment on that?
Sure.
Through accounts and passwords, that's the section that you go in, and that's where it stores all the apps and password websites. It is locked down by Face ID if you have an iPhone 10, and the passcode PIN if you have an iPhone 8 or the Touch ID. So I feel pretty secure that's secured. They also have Keychain that they store on iCloud, and that's backed up as well. So my opinion is
it's very secure. You're right. I don't dispute that at all. However, people's behavior is not very secure. Yeah. And that's how people get phished. And when they go to a website that makes them think they're going to somewhere, they'll get complacent. Sure. And because it's so easy and the passwords are there, they're liable. The liability is much higher that they're just going to automatically autofill that credential and get logged in, and then they're sunk. Right. So I just think you should make it a little bit harder to log into sites by not saving the passwords there, right, and by actually going and copying and pasting, like going and doing the little extra bit of work that's required to use a password manager. I just think it kind of keeps you a little bit safer as far as behavior is concerned. But yeah, to be clear, you're right. It is probably very, very secure as far as, you've got the secure enclave that's attached to your biometrics, and, that's pretty safe stuff.
And I'll just say I go both ways. I use 1Password, and of course 1Password integrates with Safari, so you can go in and get it, and same thing, use your Face ID or your Touch ID or the PIN or the password, and you add it to the website. So
that is getting easier, and I hope it doesn't get so easy again that it breeds complacency. That's my only issue with it.
Yeah, that's all I want to touch on that.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a couple of customization things in there, and these are kind of things you can explore on your own, like the favorites bar and tab bar. You can experiment with what those switches do. But we did want to touch on block pop-ups. It used to be, I don't know, it just used to be like a while ago that like, oh, you definitely got to turn on block pop-ups. You definitely want to block those pop-ups. And I don't know what happened, but it seems like that's now become a really bad, like not unsafe, but like bad in the terms of user interface. So many websites have pop-ups that come up that are required, and you can't get logged in. And so because of that behavior and people having that just turned on by default, that the pop-ups are blocked by default, what I've seen happen is people struggle and go around in circles trying to get logged into banking websites or medical portals, things like that, that require a popover of some sort, and it just doesn't work, and they can't figure out why. I mean, it's happened to my dad where, we were ready to like tear each other's hair out because it just wouldn't work. And finally we figured out, it's because the block, say that 10 times really fast, block pop-ups was enabled, and it should not have been, because the sites that he was navigating to for financial reasons were requiring that a pop-up serve up some information. So that's something you may want to investigate, and I wouldn't rely on the default setting for that.
No, I have that turned off.
And then, check Apple Pay and fraudulent website warnings, things like that. Those are kinds of things you want to investigate on your own too. One last thing in that setting there, the last section is called reading list, and you can, again, it depends on your needs, and if you're living lean like I am, automatically save offline reading list. That is going to, when you're surfing the web, and we're going to get into this a little bit deeper later, when you're using the reading list, if you're surfing websites and you're saving articles to read later, if you lose your internet connection, say you're in the airport and you've downloaded a bunch of articles, you go in the airplane, you have no Wi-Fi access, you can still read those articles because you've got that turned on. It's now saving it offline, which is a really, really cool feature.
Yeah, it is. Especially with iPads, so you don't have cellular, so you can read it offline.
Yep. And I do. I have the iPad that's just the Wi-Fi only. And so that feature right there serves me just fine.
Yep.
Okay. So that was settings for Safari. So definitely explore that stuff first before you start digging into the rest of this stuff. Another thing that I wanted to talk about was how to load the desktop version of a website using Safari. Now, Safari on iOS is a mobile version of a website. And when you, like, say you go to In Touch with iOS, if you wanted to, for whatever reason, see the full desktop version, it might be a little bit more, prettier. Because I know, for example, like my blog will have a mobile version where it loads beautifully on mobile, and it's a fine navigation wise, but sometimes you want to see a little bit more of a website, or sometimes the mobile version is just not. It's by default, it's set up to load on mobile quickly, but you really can't get at what you really need to. So for whatever reason, you're going to want to load the desktop version of something for some reason. And the way that you do that is when you look in the top address bar over to the right, there's a little arrow that's curving to the right, and you tap and you hold on that. And as you hold down on it, you're going to see something that pops up that says Request Desktop Site. And that will then load the desktop. So that's a tip for that.
And there are, it really depends on some websites too. And I've tried it on the iPhone, and some, even though you do it, it doesn't go to a desktop.
Oh, it still doesn't
website.
work? Yeah, so you're right. It does depend on how it's coded.
And I will talk about the third-party browsers that really give you a desktop experience later in the show.
Yep, that's coming up. So the next thing on our list, and we do have a little list of goodies for you. So the next thing on our list is, should you use an ad blocker? Now, I get this question a lot of times. Now, I'll let Dave dive into the ad blocker portion, but I first want to talk about if the answer is no, and you don't feel like going through the trouble of maybe like purchasing one and installing one and having to manage it and worry about updates and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of been my experience, like on my iPad. I just don't use an ad blocker. Dave's going to talk about, maybe why you want to. But what I do instead is, I guess I would call this like ad blocker light in a way. Instead, what I recommend that you do is learn how to use Reader View. And I do have a link in the show notes to my blog. Now, I wrote this a while ago back when it was, iOS 9, but it hasn't really changed. I mean, I haven't really updated the title. Even though it says iOS 9, it's still the same kind of feature, and it's still called Reader View. It's still available, and it still works the same way. And basically what it does is when you engage in Reader View, it does strip out most of the ads. So say, for example, you go to visit a site where a bunch of ads are loading and it's making your reading experience really horrible. What you want to do is look in the upper left-hand corner of where the website is listed, and you should see some and again, this is back to like what we were talking about before. It depends on the website. If you see some little lines there, that is a visual indicator, an icon, that means that Reader View is available. And when you tap on it, it'll strip out the ads and it'll make the website read almost like a magazine in a way. It's a really clean interface. And so it's a really great way to look at articles in Safari, basically turning your iPad into a digital reader, a digital magazine in a way where you can just scroll to your heart's content and you don't have to worry about all these things popping out at you. The other nice thing about it, too, is that you can customize the size of you can change the typeface, and you can change the size of the text, and you can change the background. Yep. So you can even make it sepia background if that's, if the white is too blinding for your eyes, or say you're reading at nighttime and you want a black background, you can do that in the Reader View and customize your reading experience. So that's one of my favorite features. I just had a client recently who said to me, they showed me these websites that they were surfing. They're like, oh my gosh, it's driving me crazy. I can't stand all of these ads and these things that get in my way. And I showed them Reader View, and it was like, that's much better. So I highly recommend that you try that if you have not.
Yeah. Wikipedia is a good example of a website. When you go onto there, I mean, they don't put ads, but the view is a little different. But when you click Reader View, it's a nice, clean. You just scroll through and you got a nice, clean read. The default font on iOS devices is San Francisco. It's called, but it's cool. You can change. There's about 8 different fonts you can change it to, including Times New Roman, which is the most common of all fonts. And like you said, the background colors, if it's easier on your eyes to go dark mode, you can go black and gray and. Or just you do the standard white. So,
once you're in reader mode, so the little
it'll show the little A's.
The little icon to the left that is the reader mode icon. I just remember this as I was talking about it. It's funny. It's actually the flush left symbol. If you're used to word processing when you're changing your orientation of your text, it's either flush left or center or rag right or justified. Well, the icon looks just like the flush left button in a word processor. So if you're looking for a visual metaphor to look for, that's what you're looking for. And then to the right of the adjust bar is where you're going to see the big A, little a. Right. And then that's what you tap on to get the different typefaces, the different background colors, and the little a, big A for enlarging the text. So you definitely got to give that a try. It's just really cool. I mean, so many people just don't know about it, and I love introducing people to that because it's just like you love to look at the look on their face when they go, that's great.
Yep.
So let's talk next about what is a tab. That's basically how you interact with Safari. Every time you are in one place on the web, surfing different websites, say you're in Facebook or you're in Twitter or you've clicked a link from an email that someone sent you or texted you, however you got there, it opens up a web page. You're on the web page, you're interacting with the website. And when you want to open up a new page within that page, you go to, like if I'm looking at my iPad and it's in landscape or horizontal mode, you're going to look for the symbol wherever you are on the page. And on iPhone, it's at the bottom. Make sure I have both my screens up here. In iPhone, in Safari, it's at the very bottom in the lower right-hand corner. You're going to look for 2 squares that overlap one another. And, people may just take that for granted, and you're used to just tapping on that. But that's how you open up a new page, and then you tap the plus sign to get a new page open, whether you're going to go to something that you've already bookmarked or you're going to type in an actual website URL like intouchwithios.com. You can use that as an example. That is opening up a new tab. And what a lot of people don't realize, and this is what I've come to learn the hard way with working with people, is that every time you tap on a link, every time you tap those little squares, it opens up what's called a new tab. And it just keeps repeating and repeating. It just keeps opening up new tabs. And I've actually met people out in the wild who have hundreds of tabs open. And you can have, just hundreds of these things. One time I helped somebody, they said, how do I get rid of all these? Like, how did it get that way? I've even now in the past, we were talking about this pre-show, like we don't really know if there's an actual limit. No. It might be 500. It might be unlimited by now. There used to be a limit where, and I've run into this where the problem was the person, said, I can't load this website. It won't load. What do I do? And I finally looked and discovered that they had so many tabs open that they had gotten to the end of the internet and couldn't open anything else.
First off, if you have more than 500 tabs open at once, you got serious problems. Because
it's like I said to you, it's not serious problems. It's just like not knowing.
Not knowing. I know.
It's just not knowing. That's why I started off talking about it that way. That people just take it for granted. They don't understand because they just haven't seen it, working, or they haven't really paid attention to that little detail that it's tab after tab after tab after tab. You actually have to close tabs as you're viewing them if you want to. So you can do one of two things. To close a tab, when you go to, say, open up a new tab, we're talking about the little squares that overlap each other again. So say you're looking at an iPhone, it's in the lower right-hand corner, and you'll see, different pages. It kind of looks like stair steps going up, almost like an accordion in a way. And you know that you can swipe up and down, and they'll move up and down for you. And you'll look in the upper left-hand corners of each of those tabs is a teeny tiny little X. Now, this is another thing that people take for granted. It's so easy for us, right? We know that we're supposed to just tap that X and make it go away. But I'm telling you, I've met so many people that they just never saw the X there because it is so small. And it is such a tiny target that with vision issues, it's really, really easy to overshoot when you go to tap it. And I've seen people like trying to stab at it to try to get it to close. So it gets to be really difficult. So then you end up just kind of playing whack-a-mole and you're not really getting anywhere. But if you can manage to tap on those little X's, that's how you will close those tabs. Now, let's say, for example, you've done, like we said, and you've ended up with all these tabs and you just are overwhelmed and you can't seem to make heads or tails of it and you just don't know how you got that way. The way to close all of those tabs at once is to tap and hold on to the two squares that overlap one another. And then you will get a message that slides up that says, close this tab, open a new private tab, a new tab, or close all, and it'll tell you the number. And I have seen that number. Like right now it says close all 13 tabs. I have 13 tabs open. See, I'm not horrible, but I do keep a lot of tabs open at once. And you can just close all 176 tabs if you need to. I've seen that happen.
Oh, yeah. So have I.
So that's a fast way to close them all if you really want to close them all. Now, let's go back a little bit. What if you don't want to close them all, but maybe you just want to tidy things up? Maybe you do need to have 57 tabs open. Maybe you're working on a research project. I mean, that happens to us, especially as we do this podcast. We do a lot of research for things. And I do have a lot of tabs open. So now I want to talk about how to organize those tabs and how to work within those tabs. So you can actually move tabs around. And it does take a little bit of finesse, I've noticed. And this is really kind of a difficult thing to explain verbally or even to show like your grandma how to do this. But the way that you move tabs around, if you wanted to reorder them, is you have to grab one by placing your finger kind of in the center of it. And you really just need to kind of push very gently on it. And you will start to see it move a little bit. And then that's when you know that you can move it. You can move it up or down or left or right. You can actually reorder those tabs around by moving it over to the left and then down. So give that a try as you're as you're listening to this. Now I'm trying it as we're talking it, and it is not very easy to do. It can be a little difficult as you're trying to reorder things. You might want to grab the one below and drag it up top, but you can move those around if you need to. And then now, if you do have a lot of tabs open, this next tip is going to be a little tricky because it will take you, if you have 176 tabs open, you're going to have to either tap at the top to get to the top, and there's going to be a lot of tabs to search through. But one time I did have a bunch of tabs open, and I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I just needed to find this one thing. Can I search tabs? Well, sure enough, if you're, say down at tab number 115 out of 176, I don't know why I just like that number, you can tap on the time at the very tippy top of the screen, and it'll just automatically take you up to the very, very top, the very first tab that you have open that you probably forgot about 7 months ago. And then once you get to the very, very tippy top, you just put your finger in the center and drag down just very slightly, and you'll see the search box revealed that says search tabs. And then that's where you can start tapping your search term in. So that's kind of a fun thing that has been really helpful. So let's see where we are. We talked about what a tab is, how to close a tab, how to move tabs into different orders, how to close multiple tabs at once, and how to search tabs. Another thing that I want to talk about is how to customize the share sheet.
Yep.
And what is the share sheet? That's that little box that has a little arrow pointing upwards. And that just means I want to take something that's here and I want to move it somewhere else, or I want to get something else involved. You want to somehow share information from one place to another. So when you tap on the box that has the arrow pointing straight up, that's the share sheet that will then slide up from the bottom. Now you're going to get, 1, 2, 3 sections. The first section, if you have AirDrop enabled, we don't have this in our show notes, but this is probably a good time to do a little bit of a security check. AirDrop is not something that you want to just have turned on willy-nilly. You really want to be choosy about whether or not you want to have AirDrop turned on. I don't feel like that's kind of a safe thing to just have enabled all the time. So you might want to investigate that later. And then the next section is going to be individual apps, and they're colored icons. You swipe to the left or to the right. And if you swipe all the way to the left until you can't go anymore, you're going to get 3 little dots that says more underneath it. And when you tap that, it'll give you, these are called activities, and it will give you a list of all the different apps that will interact with Safari in a meaningful way, and you can reorder them. You can turn them on or off depending on what you use. Like say you like to use Twitter and you want to tweet links. You may want to first turn on the Twitter activity, and then you may want to move that up to the top. Or say you text a lot of links, you may want to move message up to the top. And they're little reorder lines there that you can tap on to drag up and down and to change the order of that. So those are activities. And then the next one that I want to talk about that a lot of people just don't give enough love, I don't think. These are the ones in the next section, the bottom. These are they're more activities, but for whatever reason, they're separated out and they're black and white icons or grayscale icons. And I don't know, maybe I think that's why they don't give them as much love. They're not loved enough to have color. Well, what is up with that?
Yeah, the thing is you can't really turn them on. There are very few apps that are in there you can turn on and off. They're fixed activities. But of course,
fixed activities, that's the delegation.
Yeah, and then the thing you didn't mention also is you can reorder these too. I don't know if you want to talk about that, but
yeah, I was gonna get at that. Well, I mean, we're in that list there as I'm looking at it, and you can reorder them. There's 2 different ways you can reorder things actually. Mm-hmm. When you tap on the little more, the little 3 dots that says more, that's where you'll get the list that shows, and you can reorder them from there. You turn them on and off in there and you can reorder them. But you can also push and drag to the left or right. You can reorder them by moving them around that way. If you push on them till they kind of bubble up a little bit underneath your fingertip, you can drag them into whatever order you want them to be. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because, for example, in my activities, the very first one that I have, going back to password managers, is 1Password. I highly recommend that if you are any kind of a password manager user, do you use anything else, or are we both one password users?
Nope, I don't delve into anything else.
So that's my first love right there is one password, because I use that all the time. And then for me, the next one that I have is a Notable, which is a app for editing screenshots and things, and then print. And then the other great one is Add to Reading List. And we're going to talk about reading lists in a little bit, but it's the little icon that has the glasses, the reading glasses. And then here's one that I don't think a lot of people know about, which is Find on Page. So again, these are, you can see all of these. If you're looking at yours and you're going, what is she talking about? Swipe all the way to the left till you can't go anymore. Tap on the little 3 dots that says More, and you'll see all the little treasures in that list of activities there, because a lot of these are turned off by default. They only give you like a couple, and I don't think Find on Page is one of the default ones that's turned on. But that's where, like, if you're looking for a keyword, you can turn that on, and then as you're searching a web page in iOS Safari, you can find keywords by tapping on that little magnifying glass.
Actually,
so those are kind of my top favorites.
Actually, it's turned on by default. It doesn't have a.
Is it turned on? It's been so long since I've done like a fresh install, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, it's when you go into the share sheet and you scroll over, it's one of the permanent. You just have to, if you want it to be more closer to the front, you can redrag the order. I moved it right next to 1Password, so.
Yeah, so it's just something, these are the ones, if you use them a lot, like I just kind of outlined a couple of my favorites. Those are the ones that when I first tap that icon and it slides up and it gives me the share sheet, those are the first couple ones that I see. Because there's really, on an iPhone, there's only room for 3 or 4 or 5, icons that you see quickly there. Otherwise, you have to kind of swipe. So you just want to prioritize and put your favorites in the front of the line right there. So that was the share sheets that I wanted to talk about and customizing it. And like I said, I recommend moving 1Password to the first spot, because that's kind of where your thumb lands when you're holding your phone anyway. So placement is also important. And how to use the Find on a web page.
So much stuff.
I know. Hey, we're not done yet. We still have some time yet.
We've got some browsers I want to talk about
people
too.
People are trying this out as they're listening.
So make sure you want to talk about the browsers too, the third-party browsers.
Okay, I'll save some time for that. Space for you there.
Right.
Another really important thing that I really want to hit on today was the difference between bookmarks and reading lists. So we talked about reading lists just a little bit ago, and I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit deeper.
I love reading lists.
I love it too. The problem is that in my experience, and maybe it's just, like I said, it's the kind of clientele that I have, is that they just don't know what reading list is. It kind of was bookmarks are kind of been around forever. I don't know that reading list has. I think it was something that came out and just kind of was overlooked and people just didn't really get into it. I have worked with so many people, more people than I can count, that are, and I'm one of them, are addicted to bookmarks. We really kind of need like a self-help group for bookmarks. So I'm here to give you a little bit of help on that if you are a bookmark addict. What it used to be is that, you go and you surf a page and I want to save that for later. So you bookmark it, even though it's not really a website that you're going to visit all the time. It's just that it was an interesting article, something that you wanted to read, kind of once and maybe explore later. So you bookmark it. Well, then reading list came along, and that was a new feature. And like I said, I don't think it got enough love. And so people were just their behavior was ingrained that they just bookmarked everything. And then reading list came along, and I discovered reading lists. And that's why I mentioned having it in the share sheet there. And I also mentioned being able to get to the reader view. When you use reading list, it's like basically taking Safari and turning it into your own personal newspaper where you customize what you want to read about and you add things to the reading list. So try this every time you get to an article. Now, I'm not talking about like a website. That's the difference. When you bookmark a website, it's a website that you visit all the time, like maybe a place that you log into. Now, I use 1Password for that, for things that I log into regularly. But for websites that I want to visit frequently for whatever reason, I like to bookmark them and put them in my favorite section so that I can get at them really quickly. But if it's an article, if it's not something I'm going to keep visiting over and over again, I just was doing some research and it's just that one article that I wanted to read, or maybe that one article led to 7 different articles. Either way, reading list is the way to go for those things. I think reading list is the better tool for that task of just reading articles. So when you customize your share sheet and you put the reading list at the bottom, that's what you want to be tapping and adding to your reading list. And what will happen is over time, you will build up, it's called a reading list for a reason, because you will build up a list of all of these different articles that you want to be able to read. And the way that you get to those after you've started collecting them, so to speak, is to tap on the bookmark icon at the bottom. So that's to the left of the 2 little squares that are next to each other. So in order to open up a new page, that's the little icon that looks like a book that's opened. My dad calls it the Bible. I don't know why, but that's what I call it now. So tap on the little book, and that will take you to a place where you will see 3 icons at the top. You'll see your familiar bookmarks icon, which looks like a little book that's open. But in the center now, you'll see that familiar icon that looks like the little reading glasses. And that's your reading list. That's where all of these articles end up. This is where they culminate. This is where they land. And then this is where you can interact with them. And as you read them, you can almost treat it like email in a way. It's like an in list, because you can do the same actions like when you're reading an email message and you want to delete it. You know how you swipe to the left and it shows delete? Well, you can do that here too. So this is where all of your reading list articles will show up. And remember in the beginning when we talked about settings and we talked about that toggle switch of turning the feature on for saving them offline? This is what gets saved. And this is the area where you can store all that stuff. So when you get ready to go on an airplane or through a tunnel or someplace where you're not going to have internet access, these will be available to you. So like I said, it's like having your own personal newspaper or magazine or newsletter or something that you've customized with just the stuff that you want to read. It's all right there. So you store them in reading list, and then when you go to visit these, you use reader view, and you can strip out a lot of the ads. So let me switch gears here and let you talk about ad blockers, because I want to talk about that in this part here. Do you use an ad blocker?
No.
And if so, what do you use?
Nope, I don't. And I think they're garbage. There's a lot of apps you can download that are out there. I was looking in the App Store. I looked at one a long time ago. I tried it, and I just hated it, and I turned it off. But there's a number of them out there if you search in the App Store that are out there. Looks like most of them are free. Even Norton has ones, but I can't believe I'd avoid Norton like the plague as it is anyway. But there's so many of them out there, and no, I just don't. I find them to be more intrusive than anything else. They cause more problems than good. Even on a Mac, I wouldn't use them either. But Safari does have it built in on the Mac, but that's another story. But
right.
But
well, I'm glad you said that. I was interested. I waited to see what your answer would be on that. I wanted to pick your brain on it. I'm kind of glad you don't recommend them. My fear is that because they are billed as ad blockers, they're supposed to protect you from, the demons of the internet. I believe that there's a potential for some predatory usage there because, like I said, I work with seniors and they're the first people that are going to download those ad blockers thinking that they're doing themselves a favor when in actuality we're in iOS, so we're mostly isolated and protected from that stuff. But like I said, there's a difference between the software being secure, but the behavior not being so secure. Right. So those are kind of 2 different things that operate. So that's what I had for that section. And then we're getting low on time, so I'm going to save some of this other stuff for another time. I got through most of what I really wanted to get through.
You hit a lot of the hot topics. The search sheet. I talked about that at MacStock last year. And I've done it a number of times during my iPhone special interest group.
It's popular. People always want to know about it.
So even inspire me. I might even do another topic of focus on a whole session for my special interest group on Safari, because it's a heavily used app. I mean, let's face it. And speaking of Safari and browsers, I mean, there are a number of third-party browsers that are out there that I wanted to kind of touch upon a little bit with the remaining minutes we have here. There's basically 5 I recommend, and we have it in the show notes. Chrome, which you use Chrome on your Mac, you use Chrome on the iOS device. Firefox is out there too. Microsoft, and I mentioned it briefly last episode, has their new browser Edge, which actually I'm very surprisingly is a very robust browser. I was very impressed with it, and they've made.
We won't hold it against you, Dave.
No, I mean, you know what? There's nothing to hold against, because Microsoft is really. I'm
just teasing.
Oh, I know you are, and we always tease about Microsoft because Microsoft's Microsoft, but. Now they're making a lot of changes to their business model, and they're really paying attention to iOS devices. And since they blew it in the mobile world, they said, you know what, iOS is their baby. So if you look at all of their Office products, the apps are very robust. They're very good. So it wasn't anything less with Edge. Then there's another browser that I found very interesting, and I enjoy using. Is called Puffin.
We've talked about this before. There's even an education version that I found out that was like a Flash emulator. Right.
And then the one I just discovered actually today is actually a Firefox product. I'm going to hit on that one a little more because you were talking about ad blocking and privacy. Firefox Focus. It's a browser for, and again, all these browsers are available on iPhone or iPad. So let's say you're going to a website on the Firefox Focus. Like I'm going to Yahoo on here right now. The nice thing about what it has here, there's a quick button that says erase. You want to erase all your history? It's a simple click button, because people, I don't like, a lot of times you don't want to keep your browsing history in place. So I tap the erase button, boom, it's gone. It is really quick. I mean, and it's customizable. You can go into settings. There's a settings gear in there, and you can turn on and off privacy. It does actually, I'm noticing this now, it does have an integration to turn on and off with Safari. Now, every browser that you're going to find on an iOS device, in some way, shape, or form, Safari has some involvement in it. Apple insists that the Safari backend of their app has to have some sort of integration with their browser, but they've loosened things up a little bit over the years with iOS. But I find this interesting. I want to explore this further, and I'll can report back on why this actually has a integration check off saying you can turn on and off the integration with Safari. So
interesting.
But check that one out. Then let me touch upon Puffin a little bit. Now, Puffin, which I really like about Puffin, and it's a good browsing, it's a good browser. But the nice thing about it is you can set it to be a true desktop version of the browser. Now, on the iPhone, you'll see more mobile devices than you will on the iPad. The iPad will tend to show more desktop-oriented websites just because it can, and it's just its size. Now, if you go into some of the settings with Puffin, again, you can do all kinds of privacy things. You can do an incognito tab. Chrome, Firefox, they all do that too.
Before we get too far, that reminds me, we didn't get to that, but this is a good place to talk about it because you're going to talk about it. Privacy mode or private mode.
Right.
That's another thing that people overlook it's very easy to do in Safari when we've been talking about this. This is, how you originate something. You tap on the little squares, you get a new page open. You're given a choice at the bottom there. Right. And what I think has been happening with my people is that they're tapping private because that's an attractive word these days, private. That must be good for me. It's like, I'll just take my vitamins. Thank you. And they tap it. And then they go and they browse in private mode, and I'll let you elaborate a little bit on more what that means. But what they forget, though, is that they've done that. Meanwhile, they've got 176 tabs open in regular view, and it's one of those things in interface design that we take for granted. And people say, well, what's the difference? Well, how do I know I'm in private mode? And it is actually, once you see it, it makes sense. When you're in private mode, all of the backgrounds are dark. It's almost like, I don't know why, but for some reason, if you're in private mode, you're in dark mode. You might as well go get yourself a hoodie and put it on and tap the private button. When you're in the regular, the light comes to the light side. You're in the regular mode. All of the backgrounds are light in color or white.
Right.
And so that's the difference between the two. But what people don't realize is that they're kind of two walled off different places. And so you might have a whole bunch of tabs that are open in private mode and a whole bunch of tabs that are open in regular mode, and they don't mix. So that's something you want to investigate and try that out for yourself. Just tap the private button, see what happens. You may have done it accidentally and, oh, gee, there's, 500 tabs open. Let me close all those. How did we do that? You rewind and you'll find out.
Right.
So go ahead and explore a little bit. What does it really mean to browse in private mode? And, they have these things built in these web browsers that you're talking about too.
So
why is it so important?
Yeah, I mean, just finishing up with Puffin. Yeah, there is a selection in there. You tap in the settings, and you in the case of Puffin, and I believe Chrome, it's called an incognito mode.
Incognito, yep.
So you just tap this, and then what it does, it goes black. So the border at the top is black. Then you're browsing. What it basically means is that you're browsing private. So it won't save any cookies. It keeps your browsing history clean. It still knows where you are. It still identifies where you are. I mean, it shows your IP address. I mean, that isn't blocked. But it is blocked, so it keeps all of your browsing history is clean. You can go to websites, it won't save a thing. Now, of course, there's disadvantages to that, because if you want websites to want to store stuff, then you can't do it. But there are some times you may go to a site that you just flat out, some of these websites, like Macworld is a good example. They have so many crazy ads on there. I would rather browse incognito or in private mode, only because it's just a pain. So
you feel like you've run through it and everybody looks at everything.
And there's one example. When you go into Edge, let me talk a little bit about Edge, because Edge really has some slick features. It has the little pages at the top left of the corner of the browser. You can tap it, and then it does the same thing. It does tab browsing, similar to what we were talking about earlier with Safari. There's a button there on that browser called In Private. So that has that built in too. But they've added some really cool features within the browser too. It has a microphone that you can tap, and you can actually talk into it. It uses the mic in the iPad or the iPhone, and you can talk the browser in there.
See, that's why I like using Chrome.
Yeah.
I like being able to
Edge
use
has it
the
too.
microphone search.
Yeah, Edge has it too. So it even has a feature where you can continue on. Well, it says PC. I don't know. I've not tried it to continue on with your Mac. It's probably more PC oriented.
Sounds like a handoff kind of.
It is.
Feature.
Yeah, it's a handoff. So Edge has that. Firefox, same thing. It's got a lot of very robust, and not everybody's not everybody's a big Firefox fan. I use Firefox on my Mac all the time.
It's coming back
it really
for some reason.
The Firefox Quantum, it's called now.
I used to love Firefox, and then I don't know what happened. If it just kept getting updated so frequently, it drove me nuts.
It's a nice update. I mean,
I've been hearing really good things about it, and it's like super fast. And I wonder, we'll investigate this more, but that integration you're talking about, I remember a long time ago when Firefox was like, oh, I really wish I could use Firefox on iOS. Right. And then at some point in time, it came to iOS. It was there. Yeah. And I remember kind of like with Google Chrome, there was the synchronization feature that you could do where you had to use, kind of like another password or a key phrase that you typed in. Right. And just like in Chrome, it would synchronize all your settings and all your bookmarks and everything that, so it was kind of like an emulation of iCloud, of what we have with iCloud. And
just to wrap this up, because we're a little over on time, but that's okay. On Chrome, you go into Chrome, and Chrome is very similar to what if you use Chrome on your Mac. It works great. It does the same thing with the tabbing in the incognito tabs if you want privacy, but it also has a tab here called Other Devices. So it will sync with Chrome everywhere. So if if you're signed into your Chrome browser on your Mac if you happen to use a PC, and in my case, I do. I use Chrome. I probably should start using this more.
Chromebooks, though. I mean, for my kids, it's probably going to come in handy for their synchronizing their school stuff back and forth. We already do that on a Mac. So if they're going to use an iPad for any length of time, they'll do that. One thing, real quick, I don't want to forget to talk about when we're talking about in private mode. I have run into this many times, so I just want to put it out there that just like we said, there's many benefits to using it in any browser in privacy, incognito, whatever vocabulary term you want to use. But just be aware that there are going to be sites that don't play nicely with that. Banking sites are one of them.
Yep, you gotta have
medical portals are another. It's just like those are the two gotchas for some reason. And I have run into that problem so many times where they can't figure out, why won't it load? Why won't it let me log in? Why won't it load this one thing? And it turned out it's because it was in private mode. And you just have to use it in regular mode. So
I don't exactly recommend that you use private mode unless you absolutely have to. I mean, most of us in our world, I don't think there's really need to be private. I mean, if you're really paranoid and you don't want anybody to track anything on your history, by all means do it. A lot of times what I'll do, like let's say if you go to a library, you don't have a computer, maybe you go to a PC, or a PC would probably be a good, this would be a good example. Always be in private mode, because I wouldn't want my browsing history to be stored on some public computer. So,
well, not only that, but even in your private computers, if you're sharing it with kids,
and kids, that's right. Because
that's another thing that I run into, because I do research for
adult sites, but I mean just sites that are probably not as appropriate.
Yeah, just not appropriate. Just things that I research sometimes end up just having, if I don't know. There's just things that I researched, put it this way, that I've often wondered, gee, well, that's in my browsing history. What are they going to think about me? Dave, you'll clear my browsing history for me if I get hit by a bus, right?
That's right. So, hit our show notes. And definitely, we have links to all the browsers that I talked about today. These are my 5 favorite ones. They're all free, which is awesome. I mean, you love free.
This episode won't cost you anything.
No, it won't cost you now. So, a lot of information we hit you, but I think it's time to bring this thing to a close.
Yeah, I think we should put a bow on it. So thanks for listening, and we hope you'll rewind this one and maybe listen to it again, maybe a little slower, maybe pause it a couple times, go back. If you've listened to something and learned something, we'd really like to hear about it. So, well, thank you for listening, and we hope that you're more in touch with iOS, especially Safari, after hearing this episode. Subscribe to our podcast in your favorite podcatcher, and show your friends how to find us on Apple Podcasts, on the Google Play Store, on Stitcher Radio, and now in TuneIn. We look forward to bringing you more useful information in future episodes. I'm Melissa Davis, and you can find me online all over at the Mac Mommy.
And my name is Dave Ginsburg, and I am on Twitter at DaveG65.
Stay tuned and subscribe for future episodes, and thanks for listening.